and welcome to Byjus Exam Prep IAS. Welcome to today's Hindu analysis session with us. And before we begin looking at today's critical news article, here's a gentle reminder. This is regarding the Google form that has been attached to the description box of this video. And as conveyed to you before, in case you choose to fill it up and we get your details, we will immediately arrange a one-on-one counseling session for you from our experts. So with the UPSC Civil Services exam just a few weeks away, the prelims, do take the big step. You never know, this could be your golden ticket to clearing the UPSC at one shot. So now let's have a look at the important articles that we shall be discussing. And here we have a set of 6 articles, 3 of which correspond to your UPSC Mains exam, while 3 have been picked up as fact, crisp, short bites for the prelims. Talking about the mains-oriented articles which need a detailed analysis, the first article here has been picked up from The Hindu, New Delhi edition, page 1st. It says, 7 Indians who faced death row in Qatar. They have returned home. They are back in India. This means volumes for India-Qatar relationship. This also means a huge victory for India's diplomacy and foreign policy. Second article, page 6, talks about gender equality. What has the Indian government been doing at the global platform to promote gender equality? The third article, page number 7, is corresponding to political achievement, in fact, that how 2024 is going to be the year globally where majority of young voters will come out and cast their ballot. So this is going to be quite an interesting year because it will see a global very, very high voter turnout. What ramifications does it have for a young country like India? Young in the sense of its young demographic dividend. And now we will talk about the quick short prelim bites. The first one here is page number 12. This corresponds to ecology. We are talking about how the government wants to promote hygiene and sustainable sanitation practices in the hospitality industry. We are going to refer to a particular initiative that the government has taken here. The next article for prelims is once again from page 1st. It talks about retail inflation. Suddenly, it is easing now from spiking too high last November, December 2023 to now coming down a bit. What could this mean for the consumers? What could this mean for the economy? We will talk about that. And then we have a very interesting development from Science and Technology. That's page number 15 for you, where the article says that the Event Horizon Telescope, which is one of its own kinds, because it continues to intrigue us by giving us data about the black hole. So once again, it has brought a very interesting insight into black holes. We will talk about what is it, what could it mean for future astronomical researches. And now, without wasting any further second, let's hop on to the first article of the day. This is page number 1 and this corresponds to GS paper 2, International Relations. So we are talking about a massive triumph, we are talking about a big victory that the Indian government has received when it comes to international relations, when it comes to diplomacy. Although the news is covering the event, a new development, that how 7 Indians who were actually Navy veterans, they were the Navy personnel from India, they were working in Qatar. Now just 2 days back, they are finally released and now they are back to India. This development talks volumes about how smart international negotiations can sometimes mean milestones for relations between 2 countries, here India and Qatar. So although the article refers to a specific case scenario, what does this release mean? But in reality, the news piece is much deeper because we need to go back to 2022 before we understand this better. So we are talking about 2022. And in 2022 August, a strange development happened that erupted almost India's consistent and quite enriched bilateral ties with Qatar. Now, in August 2022, the Qatarian government suddenly arrested 7 Indian Navy personnel who were working in Qatar. Why was this done? The decision was not described much. The reasons were not highlighted much. They were just taken away at midnight and they were imprisoned. Until here, it was said that they are being arrested on the charges of espionage. Now, what are we talking about? We are talking about a situation where a foreign government arrests people, foreign nationals, on charges that they are acting like spies. In this case also, these people were arrested on charges of espionage. It was believed that these are working as Israeli spies. They are working as people who are promoting the Israeli agenda on India's behalf. But this was not taken well by India. Until here, the Indian government decided that even if they are arrested, fine. As per the Vienna Convention, they will still have all rights to access the consulate. They can consult the embassy. They can talk to Indian diplomats who are posted in Qatar. But situation became very, very ugly when suddenly the decision came in October 2023, where these people were now given capital punishment. They were now given death penalty. And this sent ripples across the global spectrum. That without a crime that has been much explained for, without charges that have been proven, how could 7 Indian Navy personnel be suddenly sentenced to death? And here, India then took strong diplomatic moves to stop this from happening. And this is exactly what the article here talks about. The article says how, on the charges of espionage, these people were arrested. Now, espionage particularly is a major international issue, by the way. So it is not something that's new for us. When we talk about espionage, we are talking about spies deployed by one country into another who can secretly, clandestinely pass information on ground to the heads of the native country. Now, probably in your modern history, when you have studied the Mauryan Empire, a very centrally administered empire, you might have read about the Akbar's regime. There as well, you've heard that how these ancient Indian empires were successfully built upon a very elaborate espionage system. It's a very age-old mechanism of government functioning. But today, when you talk about international politics, it becomes a major issue. In fact, this also reminds you of the Kulbhushan Yadav controversy, that how just a couple of years back, the International Court of Justice had reprimanded Pakistan and said that Pakistan has denied the protocols of your convention and it has not allowed Kulbhushan Yadav access to the consulate in his own defense. So such cases are very, very common. In fact, majority number of times, innocent fishermen, innocent localites, they often languish in foreign prisons on charges of espionage which are never really proven. And hence, this episode also highlighted the same phenomena. And therefore, the 7 personnel from Navy whom we are talking about were people who were employed with the Dahra Global Technologies and Consultancy firm, which works as Qatar's defense and security agencies. It works with them. So now what happened? Legal proceedings were getting delayed day by day, which was rising. It was increasing concerns at the Indian end. So Indian government then decided to take strong initiatives. Now what happened? India thought, what choices do we have? The first choice was to pressurize the Qatari government to actually investigate the case better, to actually make sure that all the people who are being charged for this criminal espionage are given right to access the Indian consulate. The second thing was, in case the legal proceedings take too much time, like it was happening in this case, another good solution is to take the help of international laws. Because even as per Article 110 of the Penal Code of Qatar, espionage is a critical crime and it could attract large punishment, anywhere from years of imprisonment to even death penalty, especially in situations of turmoil or war. In this light, it wasn't easy really to get these people acquitted on a charge as serious as this. And now, therefore, the Indian government decided to go also for legal intervention in case the situation gets worsened. So what legal interventions were available for India? Now, talking about options that India had to internationally intervene in the issue, in 2015, India and Qatar had an agreement between them. It was a bilateral agreement which said that in case the prisoners from either side are caught in one another's country. Under the agreement of 2015, these people will have the choice of being charged in their home country. So they can be charged and they can be dealt with from their native country. So this was one clause that India constantly batted upon, because this meant that probably India would have the authority, or India would get the right as per the agreement to deal with the punishment of these people, regarding their acquittal. Another thing was that when you talk about the Vienna Convention that was signed much back in the 1960s, according to this convention, there are strict protocols and frameworks which decide the conduct of diplomatic relations between two countries or any countries involved. And similarly, the Article 36 of this Vienna Convention also says that in case somebody is arrested in a foreign country, there has to be an immediate consulate intervention. The person who is imprisoned has absolute right to get consulate intervention. So India also tapped upon this. Now, at the same time, situation was escalating. It was getting worse from 2023 October onwards. Now, at this point, India decided to diplomatically deal with the issue. Eventually, the recent acquittal of these people. Now, initially, the death penalty was reduced. Initially, it was then reduced only to few months of or few years of imprisonment. But now, later, after much weeks of debate, much weeks of diplomatic tussle, finally the people were acquitted. So this now is a very big, huge diplomatic victory of India over Qatar. In fact, immediately as the acquittal happened and these people came back to India, even the Honorable Prime Minister of India, Shri Modi, has announced his decision to visit Qatar. Now already he is in UAE, as we are aware, for the inauguration of the very famous temple that has come up, once again enshrining the policies of cooperation between UAE and India. In the similar light, while coming back from UAE, he has decided to pay a visit to Qatar. So this will again set another milestone, that not only was the acquittal of these people a big legal diplomatic victory for India, it meant wonders for the relations between two nations, which are not from today, they are actually age old. Beginning somewhere in the 1960s, when the Emir of Qatar had visited India and signed many bilateral economic cooperation deals. So on that note, this recent announcement of Shri Modi's visit once again would set a tune for further better cooperation between the two nations, because as I said, the ties between the two countries are age old. Now let's remember that both the countries are not only economically into a good bilateral relationship, but also talking about a navy exercise that happens between the two countries, where intelligence sharing, geopolitical issues and state-of-the-art technology is transferred between them, between each other, is known as Zahir al-Bakr, the roar of the sea joint exercise that takes place between the Qatari Navy and the Indian Navy. It was initiated in Doha in Qatar back in 2019. Now let's also talk about raw materials. Let's talk about the energy sector. So Doha is the largest provider, rather Qatar is the largest provider of liquefied natural gas to India. At the same time, there is a huge population of expats from India who live in Qatar. In fact, about 25% of Qatari population is composed of Indian expats. So that means a huge segment of people from India, they are living and working in Qatar, contributing to the economic development of both the countries. So this comes out to be, say, about 7.5 lakh people of Indian origin in Qatar just in 2023. Apart from that, if you talk about the remittances, then the remittance sent to India from the community that is situated in Qatar, the Indian communities overseas, that comes out to be about $750 million annually. Now, apart from that, back in 2015, even the Qatari Emir had paid a visit to India. From that point onwards, there was a decision to lay a massive pipeline from Qatar onto the countries of West Asia and into India for better supply of gas and energy. So, as I said, the relation is age old. And now the recent development of how the Qatari government has cooperated and acquitted Indians who were captured from India, Indian Navy veterans, means once again a huge future prospect of bilateral ties between the both nations. Also, whatever development takes place after the Prime Minister's visit are yet to be seen. And now on that note, we can come to the second article for our mains discussion, and this pertains to GS Paper 1 Social Justice. The core of the article, what is the article all about, is how is India committing itself to bridge the gender divide that is existing in Indian workforce, digital, STEM education, healthcare sector, and overall health education sectors. So why are women misrepresented even today? That is the question. The answer comes in the form of an initiative that India has taken when India was hosting the G20 summit, which once again has been reiterated by India in the World Economic Forum in Davos. So we are talking about how the Indian government is committed that by 2047, about half of our workforce shall comprise of women. So we are talking about gender parity in workforce, but not just in workforce. We are also referring to the STEM education, which stands for Science, Technology, Engineering, Maths education, a set of skills that are pertinent because data-wise they have proven to boost the chances of employment in the formal sector of the economy. So in this light, this article talks about how India is now not only doing its own domestic efforts, but it is trying to create a global, a worldwide alliance to promote gender parity. So let's see in detail, let's break down the article. What does it talk about? So the article highlights that India has recently launched a platform. This is a global platform known as the Global Good, Gender Equity and Equality to achieve multi-sectoral gender parity. When we say multi-sectoral, we are saying that not just in one sector, but in various sectors of our economy. So multi-sector gender empowerment is the major theme behind the Global Good, Gender Equity and Equality platform. So now, in this light, the government had adopted, back when it was hosting the G20 summit in 2023, the government had spoken about the New Delhi Leaders Declaration. What was this declaration? This declaration meant that India will now strongly take steps to promote the ratio of females in schools, colleges, educations of higher excellence. Not only that, India will also have certain policy framework to make sure that even when it comes to corporate sector companies or government offices, there is a certain bare minimum representation of women that has to be made mandatory. In fact, when we talk about the 128th Amendment Bill or the Amendment Act, we are referring to the same thing. Here, we are talking about the Women Reservation Bill. Much earlier also, it had been tabled in the Parliament, but it was stalled because of political controversies. But now, as the 128th Amendment has seen the light of the day, it means that the government is also looking to provide 33% or rather one-third seats to be reserved in the Lok Sabha and state legislatures just for women. Do we need such interventions? That's again a bigger question. A lot of people often ask that, is giving reservation the right method of creating equality and women empowerment? So this means we need to understand the core of the problem. The real reason behind the problem is not that women do not get an opportunity to work in parliament or say for example panchayat, or why is the representation so low in state legislatures. The real problem lies in substantive representation. Now this could be a new word which is coming through the theme of this article. So although in Panchayati Raj institutions, ever since the 73rd, 74th Amendment Acts were created back in 1992, the government has been constantly providing one-third seats to be reserved for women, say for example in the local self-government. But even today, the representation is much lower than that. What could be the reason? If there is a possibility of women getting elected to political bodies, then why does it not happen? The problem is that whenever we provide women or any other vulnerable segment of society reservation, It is known as numerical representation, where we allow more women numerically to come and participate. But the real problem is, does numerical representation always gives birth to substantive representation? Now this is the question we need to ask. This is something that's missing, because talking about substantive representation, this is lost in multi sectoral or multi-sectionality of women. What is multi-sectionality of women? Now remember, in a country and a culture as diverse as India, women are not one consolidated, unified group. Always remember, women, this is at the core of all the economic, political and social problems that women face actually. So let's understand this carefully, because that's the underlying theme of the whole article here. Now, women in India are not a homogeneous, consolidated group. Why do we say that? The reason is that Indian society, like most other societies, they have different kind of divisions and classifications. In India, when we talk about how is our society divided between different segments, so here there are many things that come in picture. One, of course, is class. That's your economic status, your, say, income, your family income, your asset ownership. That could be the economic criteria, the job that you do, the salary that you earn. Apart from that, we have other dimensions like tribe. We have tribal women, non-tribal women. We have women from different religions, India being a multi-religious, a poly-religious country. We have multiple castes within different religions. So if you talk about, say, for example, Hinduism, obviously there are caste divisions that exist, although they are now getting reduced in a major way, but they do exist. In this situation, women themselves, rather than being one unitary voice, they get completely divided into sectionality. Women come from different layers. You can have rich, poor segment. You can have upper caste, lower caste segment. You can have the Dalit women segment. You can have tribal, non-tribal women. You can have Hindu women and other religious women, women from other religious groups. You can have women who are stratified, they are diversified on the basis of region. There could be racial, ethnic differences between them, linguistic differences between them, and this itself gives birth to the problem of intersectionality among women. Women are deeply divided on caste, religion, tribe, language, regional, economic lines, and they are not one group. So whenever we provide reservation, like in the case of 128th Amendment, we think that we are giving a platform to the women of India. In reality, that doesn't happen, because of intersectionality, once elected to power, women also, data proves that, it is a historical fact, that they actually have more allegiances to their caste, religion, tribal and regional groups. So, women welfare is not the top agenda that they will always pursue even when they are elected to power, because they belong to different segments. And sometimes your loyalty to one segment supersedes from that of another. And in that case, substantive representation then becomes a dream. And that's the reality why most reservation policies do not actually show any ground improvement. So here also in this article, we are talking about something similar. That when we say that India has adopted the New Delhi's declaration, or India has adopted the Global Good Platform for Gender Equity and Equality, will this lead to a substantive representation? That's exactly what the article is hinting at. Now recently at the World Economic Forum also, the government has shown, it has proven what all steps does it plan to take to promote all-round economic empowerment and equality for women. So the government has clearly highlighted in the World Economic Forum that India will pay attention of the problem of digital divide. Now, the problem of digital divide, once again, neither does it have a rural urban dimension only, but it also has a deep gender dimension to it. So it's true that majority of women in India, they do lack digital higher education, as we spoke about STEM education. So it is because of gendered norms, early marriage, it could be because of poverty, it could be because of religious, cultural taboos, that women in India most of the times are not participating enough in science, technical and digital education, which means most of them are not employed in the formal or the organized sector of the economy. Another problem is that, but they need to work. They need to work to support their families, but they do not have STEM education, so what choice do they have? The only area available for work is unorganized GIG or platform work. But we know that whenever we talk about these sectors, we are referring to a sector of ghost occupations, where women automatically become victims of something that we discussed earlier: vulnerable hidden unemployment, low salary, no contractual job, no maternity menstrual leave, zero pension or medical benefit. So in that case, what happens? Necessarily, they are not performing any better. They are not experiencing any empowerment. In fact, they further suffer with the concept of social dumping, which is a lot of work-based exploitation. So the government is now trying to bridge the digital divide. Now the National Education Policy again comes into picture, 2020, because it talks about mandatory smart digi classroom access to all schools, specifically government-run schools. This could be one strong solution to bridging the gender divide, at least of women and girls belonging to the poor strata of society. Next is driving climate action. So the article also interestingly says that how climate change has again a gender manifestation to it. It's intriguing, the connection between both. This is true because every time a climate disaster takes place, say for example the Turkey-Syria earthquake, we can talk about the Sikkim flash floods. During these episodes, the worst hit victims are invariably women. The reason is that whenever there is a climate tragedy that takes place, it is women generally who experience mass migration. Mass migration is like in the case of the 2015 exodus that happened after the scuffle took place in Myanmar, in the Rakhine region, and how the Rohingyas had to experience a mass exodus out of Myanmar. So what happened? The rates of sexual trafficking, the rate of reproductive exploitation, it shot up among the girls, among the Rohingya girls and women. So this is exactly what happens, that women then fall victims to sexual crimes in case there is too much migration. Apart from that, most often in various communities, women are in charge of cooking, doing domestic labor, getting the fodder and the fuel. In case of climate disaster, it is these women who experience a lack of access to natural resources, coupled with the responsibility of mothering, maternal responsibility. They further experience worse side effects. So when we talk about driving climate change, we are also talking about empowering women in return. Similarly, we talk about nutrition, health, food security. Now, as per the National Family Health Survey 5, we know that in India, about 57% women are experiencing anemia. That is a lack of hemoglobin, a lack of folate. They are extremely deficit in basic health vitals, which is evident in a very, very high maternal mortality rate coupled with infant mortality rate. The number of newborn babies who die immediately after birth and the number of women who die while giving birth. So all these issues coupled together is an agenda of the government of promoting better nutrition. What has the Indian government been doing in this regard? So when we talk about the Poshan Abhiyan, the nutritional mission of India, do remember a key target was to reduce anemia among women as well as to reduce stunting and wasting among Indian children at least by 40% until 2030. Another thing was Poshan Vatika, a very interesting initiative taken by the government, which translates in English as Nutrition Garden, which is a combination of sustainable agriculture and empowering women through fulfilling their nutritional needs. Yet again, the government also talks about promoting well-being through a woman-led development. So promoting women participation even in the informal sector jobs such as cab driving, such as delivery of food items or other platform-based works by ensuring that they are safe, better police intervention. Now, in this context, obviously, we need to talk once more about the 128th Amendment Act. We are talking about the Women Reservation Bill. Suddenly, as we said, a lot of controversies come up that do we really need this reservation bill? But then we spoke about the problem of substantive representation. Also remember that today when we talk about the 17th Lok Sabha, so do remember, even today we barely have 78 women. This would be about 14% women representation in all. If you compare this with the Scandinavian countries, such as Norway, such as Finland, Sweden, there the rates of political participation of women in parliament is 45%. So you see the huge gap that exists in reality. So then the controversy. Do we need the reservation? Yes, we do, because the problem is not really of numerical but substantive representation, and the example is right here. Just 14% women. Although it is an improvement, talking about the initial Lok Sabha, the first few Lok Sabha sessions. From there has been a jump of about 5% today. But still it's not enough. It's a very, very minimal representation, and the same story goes with state legislatures. Same story goes with the panchayats as well. So now the reservation could be an excellent tool of empowering women, because it is believed that if women are elected to political bodies through the role model effect. Now, in economics and in social studies, we call this the role model effect. It is also known as the ripple effect theory. The article also says that how if one woman is elected to power, she in turn enables many more women to come and participate. So we are just strengthening participative democracy here by allowing one woman to encourage other to come and go ahead with political work, political participation. Now, just in line with its commitment, the government has also allocated nearly $27 billion in the 2023-2024 budget to advance its commitment towards gender parity. So talking about any key achievements here, something that we can be proud about, given the platform that the government has started, the New Delhi Declaration, the Poshan Vatika, the Mission Shakti. Is there an improvement? Well, yes, because clearly a jump in India's female labour force participation rate, which was abysmally low as per the global and the Asian average. I have also explained to you in one of our sessions why. The real reason was not that women are not working. The real reason was something else completely. That was vulnerable unemployment. But today, has it become better? Yes, it has. Because now there is a jump to 37% in 22-23 as per the data of Periodic Labour Force Survey. Now, this is tremendous. This is really something to be appreciated, because this much jump shows that now we have at least 37% women who are participating in the formal sector, organized sector employment, who are contributing to our GDP, who are a part of our formal workforce. And this definitely means massive empowerment. So, this is what the article talks about. It also says that female participation, enrollment in education has been shot up by 28% in just the last 1 decade. Again, that's amazing. Talking about the science, tech, engineering, math education, women now are 43% segment of that. Is it something to be very happy about? Yes. But it comes with another underbelly. There is a hidden aspect to it, and the hidden problem is that although 43% of women are in the STEM work, in the STEM education field, there is just about 18% of them who are actually working. They have taken the STEM education, but the ones who are actually employed in the formal sector are just 18%. So look at the gap. What is this gap called? It's known as the workforce dropout. In India, so many women, despite taking higher education, are victims of workforce dropouts. In fact, when we talk about the workforce dropout, immediately our mind should focus on the Gati scheme of the government. Apart from that, the Kiran scheme of the Indian government, both the initiatives taken by the Department of Science and Technology. Why? To make sure that Indian women are encouraged to participate in PhD programs in India and abroad through government scholarships, those who are workforce dropouts. Plus, Kiran comes with an additional element of encouraging young girls from rural areas to take up science education. Now recently, in fact yesterday, the government has introduced another scheme called Swati. Swati is an online portal. It's a consolidated portal which will contain the data of all Indian women who are engaged in the formal sector. Once again, that will be a good eye-opener about where is the gap and how much of it is existing. Now on that note, even in rural India, if we see, about 9 crore women today are engaged in the self-help group. Talking about self-help group, yes, we immediately are reminded about the National Rural Livelihood Mission and the National Urban Livelihood Mission. Now both these were created with one agenda. The agenda of creating self-help groups as small, informal groups of people, poor people in urban and rural India who will come together, who will pool in their resources and start doing some self-employment venture, anything. Very good examples could be Lijjat Papad in India, a very successful women-led initiative. Seva 1972, the first of its own kind self-help group in India. The Kutumbasri in Kerala. All these are examples of how rural women are now willingly coming and taking up self-help group activities. This in turn also encourages microfinance. So with microfinance, they can emerge as big entrepreneurs in times to come. Because once again in India, another major problem is that very low entrepreneurship skills are available for women. Many reasons are there. One of the biggest reasons is low credit absorption capacity. We shall elaborate it on some other segment probably, but it just means that women are not able to finance their own ventures. One is they do not get loans that easily. Another thing is poor market linkage. So here through self-help group and microfinancing, these things are taken care of. So therefore all these developments will eventually ensure how India becomes by 2047, as per the Indian government, a society where women are equal contributors in the workforce. Now, another interesting initiative is We Led Lounge. This was created by the Ministry of Women and Child Development recently, and it was announced in Davos. What's the agenda? The agenda is to create a system, a panel, where now more women will be encouraged to take up leadership roles across various corporate organizations. At the same time, we are talking about how to promote women in agrotech, agriculture technology, about skill development. Now remember, even 10% funds were reserved in the Startup India Mission 2015, in the Skill India initiative. But how much of it was actually utilized by women? Well, that was a grey area which all these schemes are trying to focus upon. So just because India today is trying to focus not only on encouraging women in rural areas by making the rural women more techno-friendly. They are teaching them technology skills. Plus, we are focusing on women entrepreneurs. We are focusing on STEM education. We are promoting women reservation in parliament. We are promoting corporate women. So therefore, India has been labelled rightly as the pharmacy of the world. Because now India is not focusing on one but multi-sectoral women development. And on that note, let's move to the third article for your mains. This is page number 7, again GS paper 2, but relevant to Indian polity. In fact, in general, it's relevant to global polity. The article talks about, is the process of democracy across the globe today fair and transparent? Why? The issue has come into light because 2024, as per this article, is going to be one remarkable event, a remarkable phenomenal year, because a lot of people across the world are going to give their votes. Many countries across the globe are experiencing or have been experiencing electoral process. So therefore, the voter turnout is tremendous. What explains this sudden boom of voter turnout? As per the article, there are a couple of factors. One biggest factor is an increase in general global population. Specifically, in the developing countries, there is an increase of demographic dividend again. So, demographic dividend is that bracket or that segment of our population which is typically between 15 to 49 years. It's young. It is a big contributor in economic progress. And since most of these people are in the age group of electorate, they are ready to give votes, we can explain the sudden shoot up in the rate of voter base across nations. Another reason is better gender awareness. So many more women across the world are now participating in the electoral process. Now remember, just a week back when Pakistan was going through this ongoing skirmish about who has won the election, is it Mr. Nawaz Sharif or is it Mr. Imran Khan? One sitting in the prison claiming to have won the election, the other announcing his major victory. So in this scuffle, we do remember that newspapers were highlighting how women were prevented from giving their votes. They were not allowed to participate. So these are also certain realities of conservative societies across the world. But overall, if you see, gender participation, specifically in India, if we talk about it, has shot up tremendously. Third important reason could be general situation of geopolitical unrest. Now, whether you talk about Russia-Ukraine ongoing conflict, whether you talk about Iran-Pakistan scuffle, whether you talk about the West African nations, the constant military coups that are going on, or whether you talk about the Yemen, the Houthi episode, or whether you talk about how US is becoming involved because of the Houthi attacks constantly, or the Israel-Palestine, or whether you talk about the more or less cold, hot war that's going on in the Indian subcontinent region with reference to China or the South China Sea. The world is in a very difficult geopolitical situation right now. In that light, many more people are getting awareness, and this awareness towards restoring peaceful democracy has also encouraged many more people to come and begin thinking of giving their votes. So as per the article, these broader three reasons are responsible for the fact that now lots and lots of people will come and give their votes. In fact, the article says over 50 countries in which about 45% of the global population is living will be voting this year. So 2024 is going to be a historical year. Most of the elections are going to be held in developed countries, which claim to be more peaceful when you talk about the internal security situation, whether it's most countries of Asia, Europe, North America. Now, yesterday we heard about the Finland election. That was an example of how most of the countries right now are in the process of building new political base. And on that note, let's also remember that certain countries of Africa, South America are also now contemplating an electoral process to be happening in 2024 itself. So the article asks you a question, that if these many people are giving their votes this year, what is the situation of democratic process in general? Is it peaceful, transparent? Or is it marred by crimes? Is it marred by unrest? Is it marred by unfair means? That's the essence of this article. Now do remember, whenever we read any article here in the newspaper, it's all about trying to understand the main purpose, the main intent or the core of the article, and then there are many secondary facts that are revolving around it. So if you talk about the core of the article, it is the electoral process across the globe at a time when so many people are ready to give votes fair enough? And on that note, we are talking about a unique initiative mentioned in the article, and this is known as the 2022 VDEM Institute Index. The index has been created. It is known as Free and Fair Election Index. It is trying to rate different countries from a scale of 0 to 1. So 1 being perfect, a perfect, transparent, democratic electoral process. 0 being the worst, where elections are not fair and they are marred by extensive corruption, fear-mongering by political leaders, vote buying. Now, tacitly, although the article doesn't mention it clearly, but tacitly we could also here think about India. And we could refer to the vote bank politics, the caste and the religion-based politics that is a rampant part of Indian electoral process also. But the article definitely is not directly going in that direction. The article says, therefore, if the elections are irregular, the country is at the lowest. If they are very fair and good, it is actually on scale 1. So this is the depiction of the index here. And according to the index right now, there are countries like Comoros Islands, Hungary, Bangladesh, Poland, which are faring very lowly. The level of transparency and election honesty or the fairness in election is very, very poor. So which means these are marred by constant conflicts. Now what is happening in Pakistan is not hidden from anybody. What's happening in Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, West African countries, the recent controversy regarding the ECOWAS is again out in the open. So in such countries, you cannot expect that election process is going to be transparent and fair. Most of these countries, as we refer to the ECOWAS, West Africa, were marred by political military coups, which means military unrest, a forceful taking of power, dictatorship. Talking about Pakistan, it was an election, but we know that there is barely any transparency that they are talking about. So these are the countries which have scored very poorly. And talking about India, in fact, most countries of Asia are somewhere in between. India is here. Similarly, Cambodia, Indonesia are right here. Pakistan is here. So different countries have a different ranking. Specifically for India, they are in the lower half, but somewhere in the middle. Now, talking about certain countries of Asian origin, such as Mongolia, Uzbekistan, Cambodia, they are also pretty low. Let's talk about India. India is in the middle somewhere with a score of 0.53. So talking about Indian scenario, in India, there has been a 6% increase in the number of people who will give their votes in 2024 as compared to the base year 2019 when the last election was held. India is a specific case example of how a burgeoning a very young population growth leads to a better electoral base. But there is a paradox here. A lot of people might also ask that if the desired replacement level fertility rate across the globe is 2.1, India has already achieved 2.0. Then how come we constantly say that Indian population is swelling, it is increasing? Remember, just like our culture, even in India, the demographic profile is not uniform. Different states have a very different level of fertility. Talking about certain states such as Bihar, Uttarakhand, Jharkhand, and Chhattisgarh, Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, you can say that the fertility rate is still on the higher side. It's much more than the RLF, the replacement level fertility, that's perfect 2.1. It is sometimes as high as 2.6, 2.7. Talking about certain other states, particularly the peninsular Indian states and the northeastern states, the fertility is as low as 1.5. So in that case, it is not uniform at all. So this explains why India does have a good, young, thriving population, but it is not uniformly spread across India. In fact, it is variable. So that explains the sudden shoot up of voter base also, the increase of young population overall, better awareness. Social media, that also is majorly responsible for creating the awareness regarding the right to vote. So we can say that about 96.88 registered voters exist in India right now. That's a huge number. As I said, one very big reason could be better women participation. So the gender ratio also has shot up from 940 in 2023 to 948 in 2024. Again, a very positive development. According to India's Election Commission data, it says that gender ratio has improved so positively that role of women in shaping political decisions, in political participation has tremendously gone up. And apart from that, 2.63 crore new electors or new voters have been included in the electoral roll in India, out of which 1.41 crore are just female voter base. So you can see what a delightful development it is that not only overall are we talking about a more participative democracy, we're also talking about a very gender participative and parity oriented democracy here. So that's broadly what the article spoke about. And also, quickly before we move on, the article also mentions how certain countries, for example, we mentioned West African nations, which are experiencing a high degree of military violence. So there is no certainty of any transparency in democracy. In fact, although they are announcing that they will have elections in 2024, but there is yet no clarity about how would that be. And even if it does happen, how transparent and how corruption-free that would be is a point in concern. So at this, we will now proceed towards analyzing quickly our prelims bites, which are short, quick, fact-based. The first is from page number 12, The Hindu, New Delhi edition again, relevant to your GS3 Environment Biodiversity. It says how the Indian government has announced, it has in fact expressed its unhappiness that there was a decision it had announced back in 2023. But various states have not taken any action on it. And that is a regret that the central government has expressed. So we are talking about a very new system of rating. A new system of rating hospitality industry. Now do remember, India is one of those countries which has massive potential for ecotourism, religious tourism, massive potential for both. But at the same time, if hospitality like hotels, homestays, they are increasing in numbers so much, in fact they are becoming a major segment of economy today, food industry, entertainment industry, if their contribution in the overall GDP is increasing year after another, specifically after 2000, then why are they not held responsible for flouting environment norms? Just 10 days before, the Supreme Court had also done something similar. It was unhappy with how the central government was not taking a consolidated step to promote eco-friendly practices across various industries. Similar news is coming to light now. The government says that back in 2023 November, the government had launched a scheme known as Swachhata Green Leaf Rating. It meant that all units of hospitality industry, from hotels to homestays to dharmashalas to elaborate motels, highway-based accommodations, all of them were supposed to actually give a data. They were supposed to clarify how carbon neutral practices are they following. Are they following sustainable sanitation? Are they discouraging the use of polythene and plastic from their premises? Are they abandoning the use of single-use plastics? Are they practicing something as fundamental as segregation of waste at source, which is already mandated in most Indian metropolitans right now, where you cannot dump your waste, your domestic household waste together. You have to segregate it between organic, dry inorganic and medical insanitary waste, all of that. So are these people doing it? Yes or no? Because if they are not doing it, it was high time the government should have taken an action. State governments had not done enough. So it says that across various sectors, whether you talk about drinking water, sustainable sanitation, as we said, segregation of waste, proper waste disposal practices, are these being done? So the government says that they are not being done enough. And this scheme, Swachhata Green Leaf Rating, was an index to rate various hospitality units in terms of how well are they performing for eco-friendly functioning. So here, this was basically a joint collaboration between Tourism Ministry as well as the Department of Drinking Water and Sanitation. Now, except for Jammu and Kashmir, where it was implemented in a pilot mode, other states have not been doing enough. So that's what the initiative talks about. The government has also said that this is nothing but just another extension of the Swachh Bharat Mission Gramin, something that was launched as early as 2015, which spoke about 2-3 things: Swachhata Pakwada, intensive hygiene mission, banning manual scavenging, abandoning the use of dry toilets, as well as encouraging better fecal sludge management. So not enough has been done. So that's what the government says, that strictly the states should adopt good practices. But what are good practices? So good practices are about a healthy fecal sludge management, which means you need to dispose your waste properly. It has to be segregated from the clean water. Plus, it has to be done in such a sustainable way that the water that is cleaned from fecal sludge can be reutilized into agriculture and farming. That's again to save water. Apart from that, solid waste collection at source, segregation at source, promoting alternatives, healthy alternatives to single-use plastics and all of that. So therefore, this rating system will give a positional index to various hotels and restaurants across the country about how carbon neutral are they trying to be. Once again, in the light of India's commitment to achieve the SDGs towards cleaner, better climate. So not only homestays, hotels, lodges, but also restaurants, dharmashalas will all be included here. The objective is to prevent dumping of solid waste in water. The objective is to abandon plastic. The objective is to make sure that there is no kind of drainage of solid waste into pipes or into, canals or local drains. All of these. For this, a 3-tier committee shall be created, which shall together work in coordination, beginning with a verification subcommittee formed under the SDM, the sub-divisional magistrate, which shall be then followed by district committee, to be followed by state level committee under the chief secretary of the state. So that shall be the hierarchical structure of the functioning, and the government strongly wants the scheme to be implemented. With this, a page number 1 news is again important for prelims, and this is pertaining to economy. We are talking about the retail inflation in India as a respite to the consumers, business houses across the country after a huge spike from 2023 November, December to now January and into February. The retail inflation rate has suddenly come down. It has eased now, and it has come to a 3-month low of barely 5.1%. This is a good news, because whenever we talk about retail inflation, we are talking about the Consumer Price Index, the CPI, because it is the CPI as per the Reserve Bank of India's mandate back in 2014-15 that the Consumer Price Index will be used to measure the retail inflation in India, because it is this measure that captures the average fluctuation in the prices of basket of goods and services that are utilized by an average customer. So if the retail inflation shoots up, the per unit currency price which an average consumer pays to buy goods and services becomes too much. So therefore it means more spending, lesser purchasing power, lesser saving, lesser investment. Overall, it leads to more sluggish consumption in the economy. Similarly, at the same time, the government also says that we cannot use the wholesale price index when it comes to measuring the retail inflation, because wholesale price index does not include services. In fact, it is only an estimation of the increase in the prices of wholesale goods that are dealt with at a commercial level but not at individual consumer level. So here, as the retail inflation particularly has dropped down, it could mean that consumers will have better consumption expenditure, their purchasing power will shoot up, which would also mean better saving, a better investment across various financial instruments, and overall it could mean wonders to give stability to the ongoing rate of economic growth. It will give stability to the food prices. So again, it's very interrelated. Now, this recent development of retail inflation coming down is also responsible. It has been responsible because of the general ease in the prices of cereals, in the prices of food production, in the prices of fuel. So it is all a very interdependent chain. Whenever the supply chain logistics shoot up, it automatically results in a higher retail inflation. It's quite directly related to that. So here it comes as a good news that after a long big struggle with very high consumption, very high food prices, the consumers can now be at ease, and it is manifesting in the form of much cheaper services. You can talk about education, healthcare, entertainment, hospitality, medical. You can talk about basic consumption goods and services, your food basket. All of that will show a tremendous difference. And with this, now we can also proceed on one more fact about this article. It also says that in 22 major states and union territories of India, the inflation rate is also very, very heterogeneous. It's not very uniform. Say, for example, in certain states, the inflation rate is 5.10% and above, even in January, whereas in certain states, it's much lower than that. For example, Odisha right now tops the list, to be followed by Telangana, both of which have way more than 5%. But for other states, it is much more settled as of now. So, as we already discussed about the CPI, the index that measures the retail inflation in the country as such, by just analyzing the change in prices of commonly consumed goods and services. So now with this, we can proceed with our last prelims bite for the day. This is GS Paper 3 Science and Technology segment, and this comes as a very interesting discovery. But to understand this, we need to first understand the concept of Event Horizon Telescope. What is the Event Horizon Telescope? Now, this is not a single telescope. It is a set of integrated telescopes across the world. What does it do? Back in 2019, it made a very interesting discovery that had never been happened before. It released an image of black hole, not only proving its existence, but also explaining its various dynamics. This opened a new chapter in the foray of research in the black hole segment. It is a matter of great intrigue to astronomers all along. It has been that way. So now, once the Event Horizon Telescope discovered and proved the existence of the black hole, it also said that black hole seems to be an area of collapsed mass. Now, something that has much, much bigger, you can say, size as compared to a sun. Ideally, it should have a mass that is way more than sun, many suns together. But the area that it is occupying is so minimal. So what happens as a result? It is extremely heavy in gravity. If the gravity is too high, nothing, not even light, can escape from here. In fact, if at all, any object is to cross the periphery of a black hole and fall into it, immediately spiraling effect happens. Spiraling effect because the core, the center of the black hole, is the area of unimaginably high gravity, which then suddenly decreases unit by unit as you come towards outside. So in this reference, in the light of this study, recently, in fact yesterday, the Event Horizon Telescope has proven one more thing. It says that not only does the black hole exist, but also they have discovered that this black hole also has a huge periphery which can be called as the shadow of the black hole. What is this periphery and how come they have observed this shadow? So what they are trying to say here, that if the black hole has a tremendous gravity into it, what happens is that when light also reaches here, we know that it cannot escape. but due to intense gravity, the light just starts scattering at the periphery of the black hole. Because of the scattering of light, it just gets divided into two dimensions. This, in fact, is also referred to as the phenomena of lensing that astronomers have observed around the black hole. And now what is happening? Just like the light is constantly experiencing a kind of deviation, a kind of sudden elliptical movement across the black hole, the problem that's happening is that it creates an uncertain band around black hole, and this has been attributed as the shiny shadow of the black hole, as the images here are portraying. Now also people are saying that this could be very, very deeply related to the phenomena of space-time. Now according to this phenomena, which is a very popular physical theory, it says that if the mass or the gravity of an object is too much, if it is too heavy, what happens is that the entire space and time will curve around that. So something similar is happening with the black hole also. They curve around the black hole. Because of immense gravity, they are pulled and they start curving in the direction of the space-time around black hole. Because of this, the light also curves. This creates the image of a shadow, as I said, which is also referred to as lensing. So the astronomers are saying that this also could be a major discovery further in the field of the space-time theory. And with this, just like the Event Horizon Telescope had confirmed the presence of a black hole, today it is also saying that the general theory of relativity of light, it is strongly lensed. It is strongly related to the theory of curving space-time and the curving of light. Hence, a very, very critical development. And further, it shall be investigated as to what other dynamics does the black hole mystery entail. And on that note, we can quickly analyze two important questions for your mains. The first question here is associated with the article on global gender parity. It's a 20 marks question. It says, what is the Alliance for Global Good? Pretty direct. We just discussed how India has created this back in its G20 presidency. And the question also says, explain it in the context of India's commitment towards achieving multi-sectoral gender parity. Remember, we just said that India is the pharmacy of the world. It has every solution in every direction to solve the problem of gender lack of empowerment. So therefore, it is a multi-sectoral initiative taken by India. You can speak about the New Delhi Declaration on Women Empowerment. Besides, the question says illustrate. When we use words like illustrate, substantiate, justify, we must give examples. And it says, what are some important initiatives which the government has adopted in this background? So what are these initiatives? You can talk about the Women Reservation Bill to promote the substantive representation. You can speak about the Mission Shakti as we refer to. You can speak about the Kiran scheme, Gati scheme, or the Swati portal. You can also talk about how improvements are already happening in terms of STEM education, in terms of better female labor force participation, and that's all you need to do. The second question here is coming from the ecology segment, GS paper 3, as we discussed, that hospitality sector could revolutionize, it could completely change India's fight towards better climate management practices and sustainable sanitation. So we need to discuss and elaborate that. Indeed, today the government has decided to focus on the hospitality sector, as we discussed. Hotels, industries, homestays, and other such accommodation facilities. Why? Because if they are a rising segment of India's economy, if they contribute a sizable amount to the GDP, it should be their responsibility to go carbon neutral very soon. In that light, we are talking about the Swachh Bharat Green Leaf Index, where the government is encouraging these people to take up sustainable sanitation practices. And you can talk about everything that we said, from fecal sludge management to segregation at source, to proper disposal of solid waste, to make sure that the index is encouraged and implemented by the various state governments, just like it has happened in Jammu Kashmir. It can make a huge difference by not only changing consumer behavior, but also it can definitely make a lasting impact on India's mission to reduce its carbon footprint. And now on that note, I take your leave with this session. Thank you so much for being a part of today's session, and do try to attempt the questions.